Okay, so welcome to today's presentation on Feel to Heal, Pleasure as a Roadmap for Recovery and Connection. My name is Molly Schlapp-Gilgoff, and I'm one of the managers of mission initiatives here at the National Eating Disorders Association. I'm so excited to welcome you to all here. I'd like to take just a brief moment to talk a little bit about the National Eating Disorders Association and the work that we do. NEDA is a nonprofit organization working to fundamentally change the way eating disorders are understood and treated, and to empower those affected to achieve lasting well-being and recovery. Through campaigns like Eating Disorders Awareness Week and through our Campus Warriors program and NEDA Care Fair events, we are working to increase public understanding of these complex disorders. We also provide information and resources through the Grace Holland Cozine Resource Center, as well as through our educational programs like the Understanding Eating Disorders presentation and webinars like this one. Additionally, we promote early intervention through our screening tool, which has helped over 1 million people, and have just launched the screening tool in Spanish to expand our reach. We have also invested in groundbreaking research to help to develop effective treatments. If you would like to support our work and more programming like this one, we appreciate donations, and I'll include the link in the chat later on. Now I'd like to introduce our presenters, Maia Campbell and Chelsea Levy. Maia is a queer neurodivergent therapist in private practice based in upstate New York. She integrates a weight-inclusive and liberatory approach to trauma, eating disorders, and disordered eating. Chelsea is a certified intuitive eating counselor and registered dietitian nutritionist. She is the founder of Chelsea Levy Nutrition and a virtual private practice based in New York City. Chelsea is a self-identified fat Jewish healthcare provider committed to utilizing a weight-inclusive medical model for the treatment of eating disorders and chronic illness related to the endocrine system. If you have any questions during the presentation, please share them in the chat feature, and I'll relay them to Chelsea and Maia at the end of the presentation during a period for questions and answers. Now I'll turn it over to Maia and Chelsea, and thank you so much both for being here. Let me just stop screen sharing.
Thanks, Molly.
Thanks so much. So let me pop our slides on the screen here. Bear with me for just a moment. All right. Amazing. So welcome to our webinar, Sensing Safety and Seeking Pleasure. And Molly, thank you so much for introducing us. Chelsea, is there anything you want to add before we jump into what we'll be covering today?
I think just to sort of echo what you said before as the therapist in you, sort of as a nutrition therapist, inviting everyone to take care of themselves. If you want to bring a snack in or something to drink or need the restroom, please go ahead and take care of you, and we'll be right here, and this will be recorded.
Amazing. So jumping right in, we are going to cover some big topics today. So we've broken that down into 4 areas that we're going to explore together. So first, we're going to talk about the pillars of pleasure. What does it mean when we say pleasure? What kinds of experiences go into that? And then we'll lean into some skill building. What are some of the skills that we can use to notice and tune into pleasure that might also support our recovery? Then we're going to lean into an exploration of pleasure by doing an experiment together here in this webinar. And we'll close out by talking about how some of what we've learned together and explored together can support recovery. So jumping right in, we will invite you to share in the chat, what does pleasure mean to you, or what comes to mind when we say pleasure?
Yeah. Take your time. Feel free to add something in. Don't be shy. We're going to talk about different aspects of pleasure today. So really want to reflect on how multi-dimensional pleasure can be.
Mhm.
And I wonder if we should wait to do that after everybody shares, maybe.
Yeah, we are getting some responses in the chat. So I'm going to elevate the voices that are here in the chat, because right now what you share is only visible to myself, Chelsea, and Molly.
I love that.
So we've got massage, joy, goodness, doing things that feel good, a full heart, enjoyment and fun, euphoric, freedom, excitement, vitality, positive sensations, true friends, enjoyment of something without guilt, being social with friends, guilt, true enjoyment without judgment getting in the way, our five senses,
Mm.
sunshine, which I definitely am missing on this dreary spring day, spending time with people that are important to me because it brings peace to my heart, happiness, and helping others. Okay, it looks like the responses are starting to slow down, but you're welcome to continue contributing in the chat. And if you're viewing this after the fact, just take a moment to check in with yourself and what pleasure means to you. What definition or multiple definitions come to mind?
Now I'm seeing some great definitions come in.
Awesome. All right.
Happiness, helping others, taste of food,
Mhm.
spending time with people that are important to me because it brings peace to my heart. Someone
Mm,
said, the guilt that comes with pleasure is one of the reasons that I wanted to be here today. Thank you so
so
much for
glad
sharing.
you're here.
Yeah, me too.
Yes. So we've covered a lot of different dimensions.
Hmm. Yeah, and as Maya's revealing the different aspects of pleasure on this slide, I do want to make note it isn't just one thing that's happening in one part of you, it's multidimensional. It happens across your body, mind, emotions, senses, and your relationships and memories all at once. And it seems really evident in all the answers that you've shared. So thank you for that. And I'd love for us to get into sort of what the physical, emotional, mental, social, relational, spiritual parts of pleasure might look like. Um, Someone said sunshine, and yeah, feeling the warmth, the touch, the taste, the movement of sort of the space. What are we doing in sunshine? It can be really multi-dimensional. So yeah, pleasure could be coming from a delicious meal, a deep conversation, exciting ideas. Um, Multidimensional, just keep sort of naming that, and let's move forward and look at the pillars of pleasure and define them.
Oh, there's one comment in the chat that I just want to elevate here is
Yeah.
no one mentioned sex or sexuality. And I think that's important to name because out there in the media, very often when you hear the word pleasure, it's immediately associated with sex or sexuality. And I really appreciate that in this space, we're breaking that down and exploring the multidimensionality of pleasure and that it can show up in so many different ways and kinds of relationships, as Chelsea was mentioning. So, what we've done is we've illustrated some pillars of pleasure. So, we've drawn on, if anyone's seen like the seven dimensions of rest, we've drawn on some of that literature to really outline ways that we can experience pleasure. So the first is physical, right? Now that can be sex, that can be sexuality, sensuality, that can also be massage, that can also be the sun on my skin. It's tuning into our physical senses to experience that physical pleasure. We've also got mental pleasure. So if you've ever been in a workshop or a lecture or a class, or hopefully this webinar and felt, oh my goodness, this is so interesting and engaging, and I'm really stimulated, my mind is going, that's an example of mental pleasure, something that feels really good cognitively or in our brain. Emotional pleasure. I think we had some examples of this in the chat, right? That connection to others, that warm heart, that experience of emotions that feel pleasurable to me, which might feel different to you. And that's okay because pleasure is very unique and very individualized. Sensory pleasure. I know as a neurodivergent person and a therapist that works with a lot of neurodivergent people, we talk about sensory pleasure. Is my environment attuned to the needs of my senses? Um, am I not overstimulated, not understimulated, but really right in that window that feels good to my mind and my body? We've got creative pleasure. So that experience of generativity, creativity, maybe you're bringing it to a meal that you're cooking, a new recipe you're trying, maybe you're bringing it to a piece of artwork that you're working on, a care package you're putting together for a loved one, or something else. That process of creating can be quite pleasurable for some. We've got social pleasure, the relationships that we have and find nourishing or pleasurable. Um, they can be with a romantic partner, but they don't have to be. They can be with a friend, with a relative, um, with a pet, with a sense of a higher power, although that does bring us to spiritual pleasure, which again can be a relationship with a higher power, but it can also be that connection to something deeper, a sense of meaning or purpose, whether it's connected to religion or not, whether it's connected to spirituality or not. But that sense of something greater than myself that feels engaging and pleasurable to align with and act with. So I'll invite y'all to pop in the chat if you can think of any examples or how you might categorize what maybe you shared in the chat.
I love that question.
I'm going to give folks a moment to type, but it sounds like a couple folks from our last prompt were like, wait a minute, I thought about sex. I wasn't sure if I could say that here. And so thank you for checking in, because I think that's where a lot of people's minds go first. All right, we've got a great question here. What is the difference between physical and sensory pleasure? So that also brings up that these are artificial categories. So you may experience something that fits into multiple things at once, and that's okay. I think for me, I think about physical pleasure as like something explicitly that I'm doing that feels good physically that may or may not have to do with my sensory experience of the world. So, for example, I'm going to go with the sensation of a breeze touching me. That feels really nice and pleasurable to me. I love when it like tosses my hair on a windy day. Feels lovely. And I'm sensing that and feeling that with my physical body. But from a sensory perspective, on that beautiful, sunny, windy day, I've also got the quality of light that I'm attuning to. Maybe it's the amount of noise that's in the environment. Maybe it's the brightness or the visual space that I'm taking in. And then there's also that piece of like how my brain puts all of those different sensory experiences together, that multi-sensory integration that creates an atmosphere that is either sort of attuned to my needs or misattuned to my needs, that may be more or less pleasurable. So there's a lot of overlap. That's a great question. Okay. So bringing us into our next slide, I want to actually slow down and talk about our nervous system because you're hearing me use that word a lot. So our brain or our nervous system, so I'm referring, I guess, to our brain and our body here, is constantly processing input from the world. So it's processing that touch, it's processing that sound, it's processing those sensations inside our bodies without us having to actively think about it, which is really cool when you think about it. And that gives us some information to work with. So, one thing that we have learned about brains and bodies is that, and this is a big oversimplification, but most information is sorted into safe and not safe. So, you're going to hear us use the language of triggers to refer to things that our nervous system perceives as dangerous, and glimmers as things our nervous system perceives as safe. Um, and for most of us, there's going to be a lot of mixed bags as we move through the world. There's going to be a lot of both and that ratio may shift over time or the environment that we're in. But one important thing that we've learned about nervous systems is that in order to survive, our mind and our bodies mount a very strong response to triggers. If you think about it, if there's danger and we react, that's a lot safer than if there's danger and we don't react because we're not sure. So our nervous system kind of is wired to automatically try and keep us safe in that way. So conversely, glimmers need a little bit more help to register as strongly. And when we talk about how to help those glimmers sort of really register, that brings us right into the same skills we use to slow down and sense pleasure. So we've narrowed this down into 3 skills that you can use to notice, tune into, and really savor pleasurable experiences like glimmers. So, that first skill is just noticing. It's that conscious awareness of an embodied experience. So, slowing down on what is happening in the world and how is my body taking that in. So, I'll invite everyone here just to take a moment and check in with yourself. Notice something. Maybe you're noticing the sound of my voice in the space that you're in. Maybe you're noticing the brightness of the computer. Maybe notice if you want to like lean in and see a little better or lean back and dull the light. Maybe you're noticing what it's like to have the support of a chair or a bed underneath you. All of that is noticing. From there, we have the skill of tuning in. So, this is noticing things on purpose. So, it's slowing down and finding an experience and saying, hey, I want to pay attention to that. So, noticing and sitting with what you've noticed. So maybe I'm tuning into the quality of my thoughts. Are they fast or are they slow? Maybe I'm slowing down and noticing the experience of eating a meal. Is the temperature warm or cool? Is the taste showing up at the tip of my tongue or in the back of my mouth? And then finally, that brings us to the skill of savoring. So, this is intentionally tuning into glimmers. So, we've noticed what feels good. We've tuned into our mind and body experience of our environment to locate what feels good. And we're slowing down and giving our nervous system some time and space to really like soak that in a bit. So, I'm noticing a couple comments in the chat that I'm just going to check in on. Oh, amazing. We've got some folks like slowing down and noticing their experiences already. Um, and I'll welcome those of you who are tuning in after the fact, after this has been recorded. Maybe push the pause button for a moment and like check in with yourself and see what you can notice or tune into in this moment. Okay. So, Chelsea, I'm going to hand it back to you to talk us through how we might use some of these skills in designing a pleasure experiment.
Thanks for walking us through and getting us set up, Maya. So, folks, we're going to get set up into our pleasure experiment. And what that looks like is getting into a comfortable seat, maybe picking out an item that's in your close surroundings, or taking a moment to get up and grab something that you want to maybe really tune into. And we just talked about noticing, tuning in, and savoring as skills. And so we're going to attempt to do that. So that might be a candle, maybe that's lit or not, a piece of a beverage or a piece of fruit, maybe some hand lotion. It could be a blanket or a pillow that you're sitting next to, anything tactile that feels like you might want to notice and practice with. It could be, yeah, it could be anything you'd like. There's no wrong object to pick. So take a moment to really sort of identify what you might want to use today for your pleasure experiment. And we're going to, again, notice, tune in, and maybe savor. So highlighting that for us to kind of invite you in, um, thinking about sort of like the color, the texture of what's nearby that feels good. And we'll be available to answer any questions in the chat while this is going on. We're going to sit with this object for about 3 minutes and, you know, no sort of expectation on sharing. It's optional, but we'd love to hear from you after those 3 minutes or when you're ready to share your experience with us. It doesn't have to be pleasurable. If it is, share that. If it isn't, also share that. There's no right or wrong way to be. This is a practice that we're inviting you into to try. So we'll take a moment and just give you another minute to kind of, yeah, get ready and get set up in your seat. And in about a minute, yeah, we'll start the experiment for 3 minutes.
So,
So
Chelsea, I
any
know
questions?
a lot
And
of things on
yeah.
camera, but I'm going to be participating along with all of us. And I'm very excited because I have this candle that I have not opened yet, but I know that I like this scent. So I'm
Mhm.
curious. I'm curious to hear in the chat if anyone wants to share what they might be exploring or experimenting with today.
I am going to facilitate, but also maybe check in with this clementine peel I just had. Someone says lotion. Um, Bonnie said, I didn't catch the definitions of glimmers from triggers. Can you? Uh,
Oh, yeah. Here, let me jump in real quick. So,
yeah.
triggers are things that our nervous system perceives as dangerous. So, there are often things that our nervous system will mount a response to, like a stress response. Glimmers, conversely, are things that cue our nervous system to safety or that our nervous system perceives as safe. That might be pleasurable, that might not be, but on the whole, they're things our nervous system perceives as safe and that help anchor us or root us in a sense of safety or move in that direction if we're in an active stress response. So, great question. Very important foundational knowledge. So, I'm seeing a couple other things in the chat. Looks like we've got a few folks who are going to be practicing with lotion today. Uh,
Mhm.
we've got some different scents. We've got some different environments out there watching snowfall. Ooh, I love this. Letting my eyes relax while also orienting to the rhythm of snowflakes outside the window. Right. So we've got not just the view, but like the experience of the view in my body, like letting my eyes relax, which after a long day on a computer sounds really
Mhm.
nice. Okay.
Okay, great. And I see Bonnie chose a basket of fresh flowers. So, okay, someone said looking at a photo of a happy family time. Wonderful. So
Right.
we'll take this moment to invite everybody to get into your seat and explore.
And we're just going to take a few minutes here. Just practice noticing what you've got in front of you and what happens in your body in response.
And I'm going to play a little music while we listen and tune in. Invite everybody to come back into the room. If your eyes were closed, gently open them and orient back into the space with us. And thank you so much for dipping your toes into a somatic experience. We're really curious to reflect with you. Um, we invite you into sharing in the chat what you noticed, um, in your experiences, your thoughts, perhaps your sensations, emotions, actions that may have been completed. Did you engage with this chosen object? Did you stop? Was there a sort of tuning in that led to savoring? Did we stay at noticing? There's no right or wrong way to be, but just yeah, kind of coming back to noticing what this was like for us today. For some of us, this may be a regular practice, and for others, it could be the first time, and we're really excited to talk through it. Amy says, so hard to stay focused. Yeah, absolutely. It can be really hard to tune in and focus for many different reasons. Thank you for naming that. Anybody else want to share their experience?
I'm actually going to jump in and relate to that share for a moment because I am someone whose attention goes all over the place. But I also noticed for me, as much as I love the physical experience of this candle, there were a lot of distracting thoughts today.
Mm.
And so I think about like things to look for, right? So the quality of my thoughts. And I noticed the quality were kind of judgy. Like, I have a lot of candles. Did I really need to get this candle? Like, all sort of circling around that idea of underneath, like, am I worth investing in? Is my pleasure like worth it? Am I worth it? Right? And so I want to name that like this doesn't always feel good. And sometimes, whether it's wow, this is really hard to stay focused and present for, or sheesh, I feel really judgy about myself right now, can give us some helpful data. So I want to make that invitation, whether you had an experience that felt really pleasurable or maybe a little more challenging or somewhere in between, to feel free to share that.
Thank you so much for that, Maya. I think that when thoughts are going other places, it can be really challenging when we feel like this critical edge, and normalizing it as really human is really important. That, yeah, yeah. So thank you. I'm going to read some of the comments. Robin said, started out enjoying the texture of the stuffed animal I chose, then had to bring my brain back from memories of moments when teaching mindfulness techniques didn't work out with young groups in the past. Thank you for sharing that, Robin. And Heidi said, I like the smell of the lotion. I like the feeling of taking care of myself. My fingers are very dry. The ick factor of the feeling of the lotion is pretty high today. Yeah, yeah. So we can have sort of a likability of the physical tactile piece, but then sort of the factor of the texture, feeling that ick from it as well. Um, there's a utility and maybe lack of pleasure, and that's really human for these two things to exist together. Thank you so much, Robin and Heidi. Anyone else want to share their experience today?
I also appreciate the multidimensionality of Robin and Heidi's shares, right? We've got the texture of the animal, but also the associated memories. And maybe memories feel positive, maybe they feel negative or somewhere in between. Again, I'm a therapist. I don't love the either or. Um, but we may have both that physical pleasure of a sensation that feels good, maybe it's a sensory based pleasure, maybe it cues us to some social pleasure, maybe it connects us to some spiritual pleasure or a higher power, or a sense of meaning and purpose through connection. We can also have that both and of like, this feels good generally, and today it doesn't feel as good. Our minds and bodies ebb and flow and shift and change with us too, and that's okay. It's all data. As we get to know ourselves and who we are and how our minds and bodies work and respond to things. But I'll echo that call. Anyone else participating in the experiment feel comfortable sharing?
And I'll share a little bit because I did the experiment while I was facilitating, which definitely was multidimensional. The smell of this peel was really uplifting and brightening of my energy kind of on this dreary day. It smells really pleasant, which brought me this sort of savoring. It then brought this sort of like taste, right? You smell to taste. It kind of brings out something in um the whole system. And then I noticed I'm hungry, and then I start to think about, well, I need to eat, and I want to eat dinner soon. And then I thought, well, I should be paying attention to what's going on, and I hope that I am not going to miss the timing of this pause. So there's lots of sort of multi-dimensional things occurring at the same time. Um, and I hope that's helpful to share an example.
I love that. I also love how, that experience sort of shifted for you. Like it helped bring you into your body a bit more by the sound of it, right? As facilitators, we've got like multiple screens going on, lots of wanting to make sure we're doing a good job here, right? There's a lot of swirling around. But then there's that moment of, wow, I'm smelling this. I can almost taste it. And then that awareness of, oh, hang on, my body has a need right now that it's communicating. When
Yeah.
I'm able to like help my body feel safe and anchored and present enough in the moment, I have access to that data and that information. And it sounds like there's something you want to do about that after this workshop.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm not seeing any other comments in the chat. So I'll invite you, if you are tuning into this after the fact, take a moment, reflect on your experiment, maybe journal out like, what are you noticing? Not just what your thoughts are, but like, are they fast or slow? Are they specific or very diffuse? What's coming up in your body? What are your feelings like? Are there things that you really want to do, or maybe are doing now that you have sort of rooted into your body? And finally, just because we're all unique and different, like, is there something else that stands out to you or that helps you understand, um, or make sense and meaning of the experiment and experience that you just had?
Thanks, Maya.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm going to get into it. Let's talk about the barriers to pleasure, right? We were just doing a pleasure experiment. And while I named that there's nowhere to get to, we could just notice without accessing glimmers. Let's get into maybe why there might be some barriers to getting in that are getting in the way to feeling and access of that pleasure. Um, I want us to sort of just name as we are talking about this, did anybody have any barriers to feeling pleasure? Maybe this is an invitation for that. Was it hard? I think we had a couple of comments. There was one that said hard to stay focused. Yeah, yeah, it can be. We could sort of monkey brain. And so I want to invite us to think about what we think should be pleasurable and like what that brings up. Um, Challenging sort of those thoughts and what doesn't feel pleasurable. What does, what doesn't? What are the shoulds and shouldn'ts of that? Do we have preconceived ideas about what pleasure should be? As we're sort of illuminating it beyond the physical, are we like newly thinking about the way we reflect in sort of duality of the societal level, the individual level, um, and like what's coming up around pleasure? There's so many different ways that it can coexist. So wanting to name that. And I wonder
Oh,
if
go ahead.
yeah, if we start to share some of the barriers in the next slide, unless you think we should wait to
Oh,
hear from others, or you
let
wanted
me
to say
make one
something else.
last call to the chat. So whether you had a hard time with today's experiment, like me and my, thoughts and questions of was my pleasure really worth investing in? Or maybe you've had a hard time connecting to pleasure in the past. What are some of those things that got in the way? Like what made it hard to really lean into and connect to your pleasure?
Yeah, so Amy says, even though I wanted to do the pleasure experience, I found myself thinking that I could also be productive, or I should be productive instead, and pleasure is optional. Thank you so much, Amy. Yeah, that's a really great point. Um, what are the shoulds and should nots of where pleasure or non-pleasure is, and where does that come from?
Mhm.
Um,
And
Joan
then
said,
there's Oh,
Oh, good.
you
Joan says, weird if pleasure equals eating with regard um, to an eating disorder. Yeah, absolutely. There can be complexity of like food to feel scary. So maybe it doesn't feel pleasurable if I chose a piece of food. What did that bring out? Um, Sounds so sad to read out loud. Yeah,
Yeah.
that can be hard. And sometimes I feel like I don't deserve to feel pleasure, Heidi says. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna keep reading and then we'll come back to them because they're popping up. Joanna says barriers like disconnection from body and mental energy going elsewhere, capitalism and Protestant work ethic. And then Isaac says stress and anxiety can be such a distraction. Absolutely. Patricia, I have to earn a pleasure after hard work. So I have to do something in order to get that pleasure. I can't just automatically get pleasure. That's the messaging that's been sort of internalized. Katrina says, not sure if I'm in the right place to share, but the stress of life can get in the way. Anxiety. Absolutely. Absolutely. These are all barriers.
Yeah, and one thing I'm hearing in this is like that range of things from like the super individual micro to like that big macro, like cultural shifts, like Protestant work ethic and capitalism and all of that. Oh, we got one more before I click the slide. Two more.
If we've been told that we're bad for finding pleasure from certain things, oh, that's deep. Yeah, that can be really
Really
deep
rooted.
rooted messaging. And Katrina says, forgetting what we like and enjoy and having to remember. Yeah. Yeah. If we've been disconnected from the body, it may be hard to access pleasure or glimmers and like really being able to. So, as Maya sort of mentioned, the societal piece to the individual, and let's read these aloud. Anti-fat bias, racism, homophobia, transphobia, unmet needs, stuck points, secondary emotions, absence of safety, capitalism, inherited narratives, white supremacy culture, hustle culture, which I heard in the chat, healthism, trauma, ableism, and many,
And
many,
there's so
many
much
more.
more.
So
Yeah.
much more. These are just a few of my not very favorite things. Yeah.
So
Yeah. So what?
similar
Oh,
question.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I get so excited with this topic. But similar question. What are some things that contribute to eating disorders, whether it's the development of an eating disorder or the continuation of one? Barriers to recovery, things like that. Feel free to pop it in the chat.
Yeah. So we just kind of touched on an experiential with pleasure, touching on the barriers to accessing the pleasure. Um, like if we physically can or can't, or if we don't think we are allowed or should, if we're sort of have permission to or achieve something to deserve it. There's barriers. And then there's barriers to sort of to the eating disorders too, right? Or getting to that pleasure point. So what contributes to these eating disorders? I'm seeing people name low self-esteem. Food doesn't equal pleasure. It's to stuff emotions for me. Dysregulation, disembodiment, a need of control,
Yeah.
letting myself feel the negative emotions. They seem to be afraid to go through the trenches before feeling better. For me, it was perfectionism from my mother and growing up with a very controlling mom. Another reads, shaming herself for feeling pleasure from eating, sensory differences, using food to calm down and then feeling ashamed for what was eaten. Absolutely. Absolutely. Also, people who are used to negative inputs, increasing dissociation from smaller stimuli and needing intense stimuli to feel anything.
Mm.
Hmm. Trauma and attachment ruptures. Right back to racism, stuck points, homophobia, transphobia, unmet needs, trauma, hustle culture, ableism. Does any of this sound familiar? We were just here.
So this is where Chelsea and I love to talk about how pleasure can support recovery because those same barriers to experiencing pleasure are often those same things that contribute to the development of an eating disorder and function as barriers to recovery. So, um, we can really lean into those barriers to give us a roadmap for our continued healing, whether that's trauma healing that we need to be doing in therapy, whether that's activism and social change that we want to be contributing to or need our allies around us to be contributing to or need support systems to help buffer against if we can. Um, Connecting to pleasure, those same skills that we use to like explore this experience, tuning in, savoring, they give us a pathway to reconnect with our body, hopefully in a way that feels a little bit safer. Sort of reacquainting ourselves with ourselves, getting to know who we are outside of what's happened to us, outside of the eating disorder. Um, and it also creates those anchor points in recovery, right? We're not going to keep doing something if it feels awful all the time. Now, it might feel a little awful at first, right? That's where we want to really lean into the support that we have if we're working with a team, if we've got supportive loved ones, if we've got an awesome online community. But pleasurable experiences can be those anchors, those touch points, that felt sense of safety and connection. And at least for this one brief moment, it was okay to be me and to be in my body for this time that I can come back to, that I have that memory of. Chelsea, anything you want to add about working with pleasure to support recovery?
Yeah, that it's multifaceted and multidimensional, and you get to show up with both pleasure and discomfort at the same time and create more capacity over time by dipping your toes in. And we just love doing this work together of practicing and invite you all to just to name that, naming it, noticing, practicing. This is how we get closer to having more pleasure in our life and getting to a rooted place. Um, Nutrition is all rooted in the body. It's all embodiment and somatic. So the more we can create space for nourishment and feeling access to this information, um, the more pleasure we can have and the more healing we can have. And it's a really beautiful thing to witness. And while it's challenging, it is absolutely something you can dip your toes in. So you don't have to do it for a long time. You can pop in and pop out and notice and build, really sharpen your tools. So really happy that you're all here today to experience a little bit of this.
Yeah, and building off what you shared there, Chelsea, I love that idea of just like dipping our toes in, right? Because pleasure is a skill, right? Being able to tune in, sense it, sit with it, that's a skill. And if it feels like the idea of connecting to pleasure in your body or around food feels really distant right now, that's okay, right? We can lean into the other pillars of pleasure as we strengthen that skill of tuning in and connecting and savoring. So maybe we're leaning into that sensory pleasure for a while. Maybe we're leaning into that social pleasure or that creative pleasure. We're practicing and we're building those touch points of it being okay to allow ourselves pleasure and growing that capacity from a place of capacity over time. Um, and so, if this is something that feels like it is supportive of your recovery, or you just want to learn more or do more, Chelsea and I have a couple offerings coming up. So, we are going to be offering a workshop similar to this one, but really focused in on those pleasure experientials on June 26th. So, more details to be coming soon. We also run a group. This is an 8-week group where we really delve into the learning and the theory and the practice of sensing safety in our bodies and beginning to explore pleasure and making some connections and meaning out of it all. So, if that is something that feels like it wants to be on your radar, please, please, please reach out to us. I am going to leave this slide up with our emails for just a moment or two here. And feel free to reach out to either of us for more information. But I think we're going to pause and start taking questions at this point. Chelsea, anything I'm missing?
I wanted to name that everyone here, wherever you are, you deserve to experience glimmers and create that window of capacity. So, thank yourself for showing up. If you're watching this recording and you want to ask us questions that haven't been answered, feel free to reach out. We're here to support you.
And I'm going to read this comment here from Katrina. It is somewhat sad because these are innate skills that we are born with and that get unlearned. Um, Katrina, I am right there with you. We all come into this world with that skill of tuning into and sensing our needs, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And for all of those reasons we were talking about before, all of those barriers come up to disconnect us from that experience. And I'm so glad to be here with Chelsea and with all of you to be exploring how we can come back into connection and move towards that sort of inherent birthright to being being human in a body, experiencing all the feelings, including pleasure.
Yeah. We'll take a few moments to allow people to simmer on any questions you might have or, thoughts about what it was like for you to experience and notice and tuning in. What was that like? Was it what you anticipated? Was it completely different? Um, yeah. wa- Was it challenging? Was it pleasurable? Um, really want to invite people to ask any question you might have about having an eating disorder, learning how to navigate the barriers to pleasure into your nervous system when, yeah, there's a lot of shoulds and things that have been unlearned that we get to do here, right here in these different healing spaces.
Chelsea, I'm thinking about some of the common questions we get in group or questions and experiences. And one that comes to mind, and I'm thinking of you specifically because it touches on food, is what if there's an experience that I've told myself I like? Maybe it's a food that has been designated as a safe food for a while or safe to the eating disorder at least. That when I slow down and I tune in to my experience of eating it, I realize that I don't actually like it that much. What do I
Mm,
do with that information? What comes next?
yeah. I think journaling is really helpful to give yourself permission to process and meet yourself where you are. There might be some grief about it. Maybe sort of leaning in the moments of experiencing where maybe I like the smell of something, but I don't like the taste of it. There's so many complex things that can be coming up, or maybe I'm overstimulated or understimulated and I'm hungry, but nothing sounds good because of a million different variables. Um, Burnout, trauma, all the barriers. So, yeah, I think permission to grieve, but also permission to say, hey, like, I might not like it in this moment. I might like it tomorrow, you know? There's an openness to all of these experiences, that each experience we have isn't necessarily gonna be repeated, and there can be grief in that too. If you find something that you really savor and you love and you want it to keep being repeated, and then you come back to it and it's not, that could be disappointing, and so that's valid. Wherever you are is okay. We get to show up, and show curiosity. I'm wondering if you feel like you would add anything else from the therapist perspective, because I feel like, yeah,
You touched on all the points. I often come back to that idea of grief. And grief is complicated, right? There's layers to it. Maybe it's grief for not being able to know myself as fully or sort of to know what I like and what I don't like because of maybe it's the messaging I was growing up with around good foods and bad foods. Maybe it's the messaging I was growing up with around space and spaciousness to try new things. Maybe it's around the access that I had, right? Like access to food is a big thing for a lot of people. Um, and so coming back to that grief piece, not just grieving what was, but also like what wasn't.
yeah,
And sometimes it's also grieving like where I thought I would be by now, right?
right.
It's that grief of uh, wow, I haven't had the opportunity to know myself as well as I thought I would by this point, or to try what I had wanted by this point. And those are all feelings that, are great to talk about in therapy, but hard to sit with alone. And so, I also often recommend and encourage journaling, whether that's typing it down, writing it out, talking into a voice chat, um, connecting with your therapist or a trusted friend.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that when we're thinking about using food as an object, it can be helpful to practice coming in to these sort of experientials with um having had a meal, and what is it like to smell and taste food after I've eaten a meal versus before, and like how does pleasure show up for me, and how does my nervous system show up for me, how do my senses show up for me. It doesn't have to be food, but if it is food, those are great sort of ways to show up for it. And should you join a future group with us, you can do one of those practices here, or you can choose something completely tactile and non-edible.
Yeah, that makes me also think about the concept of permission. And of course, my little ADHD brain isn't going to be able to chart a clear linear course to how I got there, but stay with me for a moment. Because I think in the chat, we got a lot of comments around like, I feel guilt or I feel shame or I have these shoulds or these shouldn'ts. And I guess I'm thinking about like, what does it look like to give ourselves permission? Maybe not that full permission of a, like, yes, I can explore pleasure all the time, anytime I need to, but like permission to ask the question, right? Permission to explore, permission to put myself in a situation where I might experience pleasure in an area that someone told me I shouldn't before. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Lori asked, how do I get a copy of this? I wonder
So,
if it I think the link gets sent to the registration participants to the recording.
and I believe, and I'm hoping Molly is here and can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe these webinars will eventually be posted to the NITO website. So you will be able to see this in the future. Oh, Molly's chiming in. Yes, both of those are correct. So you will get a copy of this emailed to you.
Excellent.
And you can also find it on the NITO website at any point in the future, or if you want to share it with a friend. And Lori, I'm so glad that you're finding this helpful and want to review it. So coming back to that idea of permission, Chelsea, I'm curious, what are some ways you work with clients to support giving themselves permission to explore or experience or try something?
Mm, yeah, I think, it makes me think about when people are experiencing low self-esteem. Someone mentioned that in the chat earlier. So, sort of maybe sitting with permission that I get to still feel this way, but I could maybe like not fake it till I make it, but give myself permission to open up to another part of myself that, like,
Mhm.
maybe that I could practice, and I don't have to have an end result or an end way that it should be, but that there's possibility. And I like to use the word curiosity in that sort of way that we could show up in practice,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of like, it doesn't have to be forever. We can just practice. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to get it right on the first try. This is just practice. And I think I'll add to that as a therapist, especially with a background in working with trauma survivors. I also think about like, what helps me feel safe enough to try or to practice, right? So sometimes it's asking the question that comes before the question of like, what do I need to feel safe enough to try? Or what am I afraid will happen if I do try? Because that can give us that same information of like, okay, this might be something I need to build some safety around. Oh, it looks like we've got some comments in the chat again. Um, this has been so informational. I'm so glad that it feels that way, Lori, and glad that you'll have a chance to review it. You also write, I want to find how to help my loved one, who to contact or when. I believe the best to do is to contact you and ask the questions directly. Yes, if you have questions for me and Chelsea specifically, you're welcome to reach out. Our emails are on the screen. I know Nita's also got some great tools around screening and information for folks experiencing eating disorders, as well as for folks looking for information and resources for loved ones. So definitely check that out and get connected.